Hi, today I wanted to talk to you some more about frogs, amphibians to be exact. So I have this book that I want to read to you that talks about frogs and some parts of frogs and different things like that. But before I start reading it, I wanted you to see if you remember yesterday when we talked about frogs, how frogs come from eggs, and they do look like this. Remember, they're a clump with these little black dots in them. We can find them in water that's fairly still, no water that moves, so they're not going to be in a river or a stream, but you might find them in a pond, or you might find them in a puddle even, or maybe around the edge of the lake where the water is really still. You might find some frog eggs. Also, once they hatch, sorry, I'm digging in my bag, you're going to get a tadpole that eventually changes. Remember, it starts with its hind legs growing out, then its front legs growing out, then its gills, which allow it to breathe in the water, start to change to lungs, and then they start to look something more like this, and then this, and eventually they lose their tail, they get lungs, and they breathe on land and become our frog. So all the way from this little tiny egg, which hatches and becomes a tadpole, it becomes a frog and does some changing or growing up. So we're going to read a little more about frogs. We read about them yesterday, how they changed from a tadpole to a frog. But today it's going to have some other frogs, which I think frogs are so fascinating because there are so many different kinds of them, and not all of them live here in America. Some of them live other places. So this is frogs. It says they are amazing amphibians, and this is from the editors of Time for Kids. So Time is a magazine, and it says with Catherine Hoffman Satterfield. So look at that frog. I love his red eyes. He is a red-eyed tree frog, and this is another frog up here. And see how his vocal sac is puffed out. That's where he's making his noise. Isn't that cool? So if I can find my video, I took a video of a frog making its noise, and you can actually see its vocal sac. I'll post it on here so your parents can show it to you. One hoppy family. Aww. 3 red-eyed tree frogs, one with an inflated vocal sac right here. Ribbit, ribbit, ribbit. Can you hear the frogs? Every kind of frog has its own call, and that is how frogs find each other. Aren't they cute? They're all snuggled up there. They have their own call, make their own sound. This is a bullfrog in Virginia. Look here. This is a salamander, and a salamander is not a frog, but it is an amphibian. So it's related to a frog, but not a frog. It's a salamander. Amphibians are animals that have a backbone. We have a backbone. They are animals that live both on the land and in the water. And amphibians are cold-blooded. Their body temperature changes when the temperature around them changes. So even if Miss Holly were to go cover this frog up if he was cold, he couldn't get warm on his own. He needs the sunshine. So that's why you see them sitting in the sun trying to get warm, or when they go hide in the shade, they're trying to get cool because the air around them is how hot or cold they will be. Take a close look at a frog. Frogs and toads look a lot alike. They're not exactly alike. Sometimes even the experts cannot tell them apart. So this is our frog, and this is his skin, and his frog skin is smooth and it is wet or feels damp when you touch him. They have hind legs. They have long back legs, and they use them to leap. They have webbed feet, and extra skin between their toes help them be able to swim. So they use their feet like a paddle so that they can pull the water and swim. All right. Their front legs these are their front legs, and they have short front legs, long back legs, and they use those legs to prop themselves up so they can hold themselves up. They have a tympanic membrane right here, and frogs and toads have them. They're an eardrum, and it's on the surface of their skin. They have very, very good hearing. Most frogs and toads have eyes that bulge, and they can see in front, to the sides and partially behind them. So I'm going to hold it up here so you can see. See his ear and his eye. And they call them bulging eyes because they kind of stick out of their head a little bit. Okay, so this is the frog. Now this is the toad over here. Most toads live on the land. They don't like the water at all. They usually have dry skin, so when you touch them, they don't feel wet, and they're kind of warty, which means they're kind of bumpy. They're not smooth. They have short back legs, not long ones, and there is hardly any webbing between their toes because they don't get in the water to swim, so they don't really need feet that are going to help them swim very good. This is a desert spade frog. Look at that. Here, I'll hold it up there so you can see it a little better. And this one is an African clawed toad. Oh my, look at that. Frogs live in many habitats. Remember, the habitat is their home. Most frogs like to be wet, and so they live near ponds, swamps, and lakes. But some frogs live in the desert, and they go underground to stay cool and wet, because though the desert is dry and hot on the top, usually if you dig down far enough in the desert, there is some water there, or there's water in places around there. All frogs begin life as an egg. Some frogs lay as many as 10,000 eggs. Oh my goodness, look at all these. Most frogs do not protect their eggs. So the mama, she lays the eggs and she swims away. But this particular frog is called a male conquin frog, and it does stay close to its eggs and watch. So it's the boy. He's a mountain conquin frog and their eggs. A tadpole hatches from a frog egg. It has a long tail and gills. We talked about that. Like a fish. The tadpole swims and eats and grows. It goes through a change called a metamorphosis. We talked about that before with our butterflies. Gradually, the gills disappear and lungs form. They need gills for the water, lungs for the land. Red-eyed leafed frog tadpoles, that's what these are. And these frogs are actually in a place called Costa Rica. So that's not going to be in America. A male golden poison frog carries its tadpoles on its back. Look at that. And they call them a poison frog because sometimes it's their skin that's poisonous, and then other times it might be the saliva from them that's poisonous. That's very interesting that one carries its tadpoles with it. This is a European froglet, which means it's not a tadpole anymore, but it's turning into a frog. They call it a froglet. The tadpole begins to look like a frog. Its legs form and its tail shrinks, and at about 12 weeks old, which is going to be about 3 months, the tadpole becomes a froglet, and soon its tail will disappear. Now remember, I told you it does not fall off, right? But it starts to grow and shrink. It actually shrinks. This is a strawberry poison dart frog right here. The planet is hopping with frogs. Frogs can be green, gray, yellow, orange, red, or blue. There are nearly 5,000 kinds of frogs, and scientists keep finding new frogs. Oh, look at this frog. It's only as big as an eraser. And then there is the Goliath frog. Oh, this one's the Cuban tree frog. It's the smallest frog. But the Goliath frog is the world's largest frog, and it can grow up to 15 inches long. That's as big as a computer keyboard. So if you hold up your ruler, remember I told you there's 12 inches in that. It's actually longer than your ruler. That is great big for a frog. The hungry frog. This is a white tree frog. Some frogs eat spiders, snails, slugs, earthworms with their long sticky tongues. Frogs eat insects that like to destroy the crops of farmers. So thank goodness for frogs, right? They eat all those insects that like to eat the things that farmers are growing. See his tongue curled up there? Big frogs eat big meals. Oh, look, you can see its legs hanging out. Those big frogs like to eat mice, small reptiles like a lizard, and even other frogs. Ooh. Frogs use their eyeballs to swallow food. By blinking, the frog helps pushes its food down its throat. This is a South American bullfrog, and it is actually eating a walking stick. This does not live here in America. It lives in South America. So we're going to find it in the United States. Some frogs have favorite foods. The Madagascar Matella frog mainly eats ants. The ants contain poison. This makes the frog's skin poisonous. So this is a Madagascar Matella frog. Look, they're different colors. This one's the black and yellow, and then there's an orange one. So because they eat a poisonous insect, then it actually makes their skin poisonous. Are frogs in trouble? Many frogs have poisonous skin. The most poisonous frogs are brightly colored, and this is a way of warning animals that these frogs are not something to eat. These are blue poison dart frogs right here. They're pretty, aren't they? But remember, they have poisonous skin. Some frogs, oh look, use camouflage to protect themselves. They blend into the trees, plants, or dirt where they live. This is the Vietnamese mossy frog, and it looks like a clump of moss. Look at it. Isn't that cool? Here's its eye right here. Frog habitats are being destroyed. Remember, I told you the habitat is where they live, and all animals have a habitat. When humans cut down trees, some frogs have no place to live. Pollution, that's whenever we don't pick up our trash and put it where it's supposed to be, or we throw things out that shouldn't be out on the ground. That hurts the frogs too. Their thin skin can absorb harmful chemicals, and many kinds of frogs are in danger of extinction. Scientists are working hard to help protect them. So this one is an endangered tomato frog from Madagascar. Remember, Madagascar is not in America. It's someplace else. And this is Wallace's flying frog. And I want you to look at its feet. Look. Now, it doesn't actually fly, but if it jumps out of a tree, it can glide with these big feet. Look at its feet. Isn't that awesome? Like 4 little umbrellas. Oh, I'm going to read this fun fact to you down here. It says the wood frog can live in the extreme cold. It can survive for weeks with more than half of its body frozen. Oh my goodness, look, it's in an ice cube. Isn't that interesting? So some of the words that we talked about today are amphibian. Remember, any cold-blooded animal that can live on both land and water. And remember, I told you it can't make its own heat. So in order for it to get warm, it gets in the sun. In order for it to get cool, it's going to go to the shade or get in some water. This is the habitat, and that is the place where any animal lives, not just frogs. Camouflage, in order for it to blend in. Metamorphosis, which means that our frogs change from a tadpole into a froglet and then into a frog. The froglet is one of the stages, right, of the frog before it finally becomes a full-fledged adult frog. And here is our tadpoles. I hope you enjoyed reading about frogs with Miss Hiley today. I will talk to you later. Bye, boys and girls.